The champagne had gone flat, just like my marriage, and we hadn't even made it through the honeymoon suite checkout. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories. I'm Eli Granger, 38 years old, owner of a small IT security firm that barely keeps me in decent scotch and mortgage payments. 3 days ago, I thought I'd won the lottery when Sabrina Walsh agreed to marry me. She was everything I wasn't, polished, connected, beautiful, in that Instagram-perfect way that makes other men hate you and women whisper behind their hands. Now I was staring at her across our honeymoon suite at the Ritz-Carlton, watching her reapply lipstick with the casual indifference of someone who just asked me to pass the salt. Except what she'd actually said, right after we'd finished what I'd foolishly believed was passionate newlywed intimacy, was, I told my boyfriend he could swing by later tonight. You're what? I'd asked, certain I'd misheard. Chase, you know, from the gym. He's been helping me stay in shape for the wedding. She smiled at me in the mirror, that same bright smile she'd worn walking down the aisle. Don't look so shocked, Eli. You didn't really think this was about love, did you? The words hit me like a punch to the solar plexus. I sat there on the edge of the king-sized bed, still wearing nothing but hotel slippers, trying to process what my wife of exactly 18 hours had just told me. You're joking, I said, though the sick feeling in my stomach told me she wasn't. Oh, honey. She turned from the mirror, and for the first time since I'd known her, her expression was completely genuine, cold, calculating, and utterly without affection. You're sweet, but you're not exactly Chase material. He's got abs you could bounce quarters off, and he actually knows how to make a woman feel good. I stood up slowly, my mind racing through everything that had led to this moment. The whirlwind courtship, her sudden interest in marriage after only 6 months of dating, the way she'd insisted on keeping separate bank accounts for now. How had I been so blind? So what am I, exactly? I asked, reaching for my clothes. The meal ticket? You're stable, she said, as if that explained everything. You've got the house, the business, the boring suburban dream. Chase is fun, but he's not husband material. You're both, in your own ways. The casual cruelty in her voice was breathtaking. I'd heard that tone before, in my previous life as a bouncer at some of Boston's seedier establishments. It was the sound people made when they thought they held all the cards and you were too weak to do anything about it. They were usually wrong about that last part. I finished getting dressed in silence while Sabrina continued her makeup routine. She was humming, actually humming, like she'd just told me she was running out to get ice, not that she was planning to cheat on me in our honeymoon suite. I'll be back in a few hours, she said, grabbing her purse. Try not to wait up. The door closed behind her with a soft click, and I stood alone in the room that still smelled like her perfume and my shattered illusions. For about 30 seconds, I felt sorry for myself. Then the old Eli, the one who'd learned to survive in places where weakness got you hurt, started to wake up. I called the front desk and told them to have Mrs. Granger's belongings moved to the lobby. Then I called our travel agent and canceled the rest of our honeymoon trip to Aruba. Finally, I sat down and wrote a note on hotel stationery. Trip's canceled. So is your secret. I left it on top of her suitcase and took a taxi home to our house in Millbrook, the upscale suburb outside Boston where everyone knew everyone else's business. By the time Sabrina returned to the hotel, I was already in my home office, her laptop open in front of me, scrolling through months of explicit text messages between her and Chase Banner. Turns out my new wife had been documenting her affair in remarkable detail. Photos, videos, planning sessions for their post-wedding rendezvous. It was all there, saved to her cloud account with the same password she'd used for everything else. Chase Me 2019. Some people never learn to be careful with their secrets. Lucky for me, Sabrina was one of them. My phone started ringing around midnight. I let it go to voicemail, then listened to her increasingly frantic messages. The first few were angry, demanding to know where her things were. By the fourth call, she was crying, begging me to call her back. The fifth was just heavy breathing and what sounded like her throwing something across a room. I poured myself 3 fingers of bourbon and started planning. Sabrina came home the next morning looking like she'd spent the night in her car, which, according to the hotel security footage I'd already obtained through a contact in the business, she had. We need to talk, she said, standing in our kitchen doorway with her hair disheveled and yesterday's makeup smeared under her eyes. Do we? I was sitting at the breakfast bar, drinking coffee and reading her text messages on my tablet. Because I feel like you said everything you needed to say last night. She saw what I was reading and her face went white. You went through my phone? Your cloud account, actually. Amazing what people store up there these days. I scrolled to a particularly explicit photo she'd sent Chase 3 days before our wedding. Is this what you meant by staying in shape? Eli, please, I can explain. Can you explain this? I turned the tablet toward her, showing a video she'd made for Chase while I was at work the week before our wedding. She was wearing the lingerie I'd bought her for our honeymoon. She sank into the chair across from me, and I could see her calculating, trying to figure out how much I knew and how much damage control she could manage. It's not what you think, she said finally. It's exactly what I think. The question is, what are we going to do about it? For a moment, hope flickered in her eyes. We can work through this. Marriage is about forgiveness, right? Everyone makes mistakes. Mistakes? I laughed, and she flinched at the sound. Sabrina, you've been planning this for months. You married me knowing you were going to keep screwing your personal trainer. That's not a mistake. That's a business plan. She tried a different approach, leaning forward and reaching for my hand. I know I hurt you, but we can fix this. I'll end it with Chase. We'll go to counseling. I'll do whatever it takes. I pulled my hand away. No, you won't. Because this isn't about fixing anything. This is about consequences. The word hung in the air between us like a threat, which it was. What do you want? She asked quietly. I want you to understand something, I said, closing the tablet. You picked the wrong man to play. I'm not some suburban pushover you can manipulate and discard when you get bored. I used to work in places where people like you got eaten alive. Are you threatening me? I'm educating you. There's a difference. She stared at me for a long moment, and I could see her reassessing everything she thought she knew about me. The mild-mannered IT guy she'd married was showing teeth she didn't know he had. I need some air, she said finally, standing up. Take all the time you need. But Sabrina? She turned back to me. If I were you, I'd be very careful about who I talk to about our conversation. Some secrets are better kept private. After she left, I called my old friend Rick Moreau, who tended bar at Flanagan's, the local watering hole where half of Millbrook went to drink and gossip. Eli, how's married life treating you? Rick's voice was warm with genuine affection. We'd known each other since high school, and he was one of the few people who remembered me before I'd cleaned up my act and gone legitimate. It's educational, I said. Listen, I need a favor. What do you know about Chase Banner? The pretty boy from Elite Fitness? Why? Let's just say our paths have crossed. What's the word on him? Rick was quiet for a moment. You want the official version or the real one? The real one. He's a player, Eli. Sleeps with half his female clients. Promises them all they're special. Word is, he's got something going with a married woman. Someone with money. Why? Don't tell me Sabrina's training with him. Something like that? What else? He's all image, no substance. Drives a leased BMW. Lives in a studio apartment. Spends more on protein powder than most people spend on groceries. And he's got a temper when things don't go his way. Thanks, Rick. I owe you one. You owe me a lot more than one. But who's counting? Eli? Be careful, okay? Whatever this is about, be smart about it. Always am. That afternoon, I drove to Elite Fitness and bought a day pass. Chase Banner was easy to spot. 6'2", perfectly sculpted, leading a yoga class full of women who hung on his every word. He was exactly the kind of man Sabrina would fall for. All surface, no depth, and completely convinced of his own irresistibility. I watched him work for an hour, noting his routines, his clients, his habits. He flirted shamelessly with everyone, married or not. During his break, he checked his phone constantly, probably waiting for messages from my wife. When he went to the locker room, I followed. Chase Banner, I said as he was changing his shirt. He looked up, instantly wary. He was smart enough to recognize a threat when he saw one, even if he couldn't place exactly what kind of threat I represented. Do I know you? Eli Granger. I believe you know my wife, Sabrina. His face went through several expressions in rapid succession. Surprise, guilt, calculation, and finally, defiance. I don't know what you're talking about. Sure you do. You've been talking to her about it for months. I pulled out my phone and showed him one of their text conversations. Quite the poet, aren't you? I can't wait to taste you again. Very romantic. He straightened up, trying to use his height advantage to intimidate me. Look, man, whatever problems you and your wife have are about to become your problems too, I finished. See, Chase, I know all about you. The married clients you've been servicing, the money you owe on that BMW, the fact that you're one bad month away from losing this job and moving back in with your mother in Revere. His jaw tightened. You don't know anything. I know you're a coward who preys on lonely women and thinks he can hide behind his pretty face forever. I also know that's about to change. I stepped closer, and he actually backed up against the lockers. Stay away from my wife, I said quietly. Stay away from my house. Stay away from my life. Because if you don't, I'm going to make sure everyone in this gym knows exactly what kind of man you really are. You can't prove anything. I smiled. Chase, I've got video. I've got photos. I've got text messages that would make a sailor blush. The only question is whether I share them with your boss, your clients, or just post them online and let nature take its course. He was sweating now, and it wasn't from his workout. What do you want? I want you to disappear. Find another gym, another town, another life. Because this one's about to get very uncomfortable for you. I left him standing there, staring at his phone like it might explode in his hands, which in a way, it was about to. Sabrina didn't come home that night, or the next. When she finally showed up on Thursday evening, she had backup. Her best friend Brianna Walsh, a corporate lawyer with the kind of sharp edges that could cut glass, and Kylie Chen, a sweet-faced marketing coordinator from Sabrina's office who looked like she'd rather be anywhere else. We need to discuss this situation rationally, Brianna announced, striding into my living room like she owned it. She was tall, blonde, and used to getting her way through a combination of legal threats and sheer intimidation. What situation is that? I asked, not getting up from my chair. Your harassment of Chase Banner, Sabrina said, and your violation of my privacy. Harassment? I laughed. I had one conversation with your boyfriend. Hardly harassment. You threatened him, Kylie said quietly. He's scared to go to work? Good. He should be scared. Men who sleep with other people's wives usually are, once they get caught. Brianna pulled out her phone and started recording. I want you to know that this conversation is being documented. Any further threats against Mr. Banner or attempts to intimidate my client will result in legal action. Your client? I looked at Sabrina. You hired a lawyer? For what? For the divorce, Sabrina said, lifting her chin defiantly. I'm filing for dissolution of marriage on grounds of mental cruelty and harassment. Mental cruelty. I nodded slowly. That's interesting. Tell me, Brianna, in your legal opinion, what constitutes mental cruelty? Is it threatening someone's affair partner, or is it having the affair in the first place? The affair is irrelevant, Brianna said smoothly. Massachusetts is a no-fault state. What matters is your threatening behavior and attempts to control and intimidate my client. I see. And I suppose you have evidence of this threatening behavior? We have Chase's testimony about your confrontation at the gym. His testimony? I pulled out my tablet and opened a video file. Would that be the same Chase Banner who sent this to your client last week? The video started playing, and Kylie gasped. Even Brianna looked uncomfortable as Chase's voice filled the room, describing in graphic detail what he wanted to do to Sabrina when her boring husband wasn't around. Turn that off, Sabrina snapped. Why? Isn't this the man you're leaving me for, the one I'm supposedly harassing? I paused the video on a particularly unflattering frame. Seems like relevant evidence to me. Brianna stopped recording. How did you obtain this material? From my wife's cloud account, which as her husband I have legal access to. Funny how that works. That's a violation of privacy. No, that's evidence of adultery, which, while not grounds for divorce in Massachusetts, is certainly grounds for a very interesting conversation about asset division. I could see Brianna recalculating, trying to figure out how much damage the videos and messages could do to their case. Sabrina was looking increasingly pale, and Kylie was staring at her hands like she wished she could disappear. What do you want, Eli? Sabrina asked finally. I want honesty. When did this start? She glanced at Brianna, who nodded slightly. 6 months ago. Before we got engaged. Yes. So you were sleeping with him when you said yes to my proposal? Yes. And you planned to keep sleeping with him after we got married? Yes. The simple honesty was almost refreshing after days of lies and manipulation. Thank you, I said. That's all I needed to hear. So you'll agree to an amicable divorce? Brianna asked. Oh, absolutely not. See, Brianna, you made a mistake. You assumed I was some heartbroken suburban husband who'd roll over and play dead to avoid embarrassment. But I'm not embarrassed. I'm angry. And angry men like me don't go quietly. What's that supposed to mean? Sabrina demanded. It means you picked the wrong target. It means your boyfriend is about to learn what real harassment looks like. And it means your little support network here is about to discover that loyalty to you comes with a price. I looked directly at Kylie. For instance, did you know that your friend Sabrina has been sharing details about your personal life with Chase, your divorce, your financial problems, that embarrassing incident at the office Christmas party? It's all in their messages. Apparently she finds your desperation amusing. Kylie's head snapped up, her face flushing red. That's not true. Show her, I said to Sabrina. Show her the messages where you and Chase laugh about how pathetic she is." "Eli, stop," Sabrina said, but her voice was shaking. "Or how about you, Brianna? Did you know your best friend has been telling Chase about your cocaine problem? The one you think nobody knows about? Apparently she was worried about bringing him to parties where you might be too obvious about it." Brianna's face went white. "You're lying." "Am I? Sabrina, want to tell them about the messages, or should I?" The silence in the room was deafening. I could see the friendships cracking in real time, doubt and betrayal spreading like poison. "I think you ladies should leave now," I said pleasantly. "Sabrina and I have some things to discuss." Brianna and Kylie left without another word, but I could hear them arguing in the driveway. Sabrina stood in the middle of my living room, looking smaller and more vulnerable than I'd ever seen her. "You bastard," she whispered. "Yes, I am, but I'm an honest bastard, which is more than I can say for you." "What happens now?" "Now? Now you get to experience consequences. Real ones. The kind that don't go away when you bat your eyelashes or find a new man to manipulate. I won't let you destroy me. Sabrina, you destroyed yourself the moment you decided to marry me while sleeping with someone else. I'm just making sure everyone else knows about it." She left that night, and I didn't see her for 3 days, but I heard about her. Rick called to tell me she'd been at Flanagan's, drinking alone and crying. Mrs. Fenway, our elderly neighbor who knew everything that happened in Millbrook, mentioned that Sabrina had been asking around about apartments. And Chase? Chase had stopped showing up at Elite Fitness altogether. The call came on a Sunday morning while I was reading the paper and drinking coffee. It was Kylie, and she sounded furious. "You need to meet us at Flanagan's, now." "Do I?" "Brianna wants to talk. So does Chase. We're going to settle this like adults." Adults don't usually require neutral territory for conversation, but sure. I'll be there in 20 minutes. Flanagan's was busy for a Sunday afternoon, filled with the usual crowd of locals nursing hangovers and watching football. Rick nodded at me from behind the bar as I walked in, his expression carefully neutral. They were waiting in a corner booth, Sabrina, Brianna, Kylie, and Chase. It looked like an intervention, which I suppose it was. "Eli," Brianna said as I sat down, "we need to end this." "And what?" "The harassment, the threats, the psychological warfare." She had a folder in front of her, thick with papers. "We're prepared to offer you a generous settlement in exchange for a quiet divorce and a mutual non-disclosure agreement." "How generous?" "You keep the house and your business. Sabrina walks away with nothing but her personal belongings. In exchange, you agree to stop contacting Chase, stop spreading private information, and sign an NDA preventing either party from discussing the details of the marriage or divorce." It was actually a good offer, better than I'd expected, which meant they were more scared than they were letting on. "What's the catch?" "No catch. We just want this to end." I looked around the table. Sabrina was staring at her hands, refusing to meet my eyes. Kylie looked uncomfortable, like she'd rather be anywhere else. Chase was trying to project confidence, but I could see the fear underneath. "You know what I find interesting?" I said. 3 days ago you were ready to fight me in court. Now you're offering me everything I could want just to make me go away. What changed?" "We realized this was getting out of hand," Brianna said. "Or you realized I have more ammunition than you thought." I pulled out my phone and set it on the table. "See, the thing about people who live their entire lives online is that they leave trails, digital footprints, evidence." "What kind of evidence?" Chase asked, speaking for the first time. "The kind that shows you've been running the same scam on other women, married women with money, specifically. The kind that proves this isn't love, it's business." Chase's face went red. "You don't know what you're talking about." "Don't I? Jennifer Morrison, divorced 6 months after you started training her. Patricia Vance, currently separated from her husband of 15 years. Should I go on? Those women made their own choices. After you seduced them with the same lines you used on my wife. After you convinced them their marriages were loveless and they deserved better. After you helped them transfer money into accounts you could access." The table went dead silent. Sabrina was staring at Chase with growing horror. "That's not what this is," she said quietly. "Isn't it?" I showed her a bank statement on my phone. "Explain the $5,000 transfer you made to Chase's account last month. The one you told me was for a charity donation." "You said you needed help with your rent," Sabrina said to Chase. "You said it was temporary." "It was temporary," he said, but his voice was shaking. "Like it was temporary with Jennifer Morrison and Patricia Vance and the 3 others I found records for." I leaned back in my chair. "Congratulations, Sabrina. You're not his girlfriend. You're his mark." Brianna was frantically scribbling notes, probably trying to figure out how to spin this new information. Kylie was staring at Chase like she'd never seen him before. Even if that's true, Brianna said, it doesn't change anything. Sabrina still wants a divorce, and you still need to stop the harassment. But it does change the settlement terms, I said, because now I'm not just the wronged husband. I'm the victim of a criminal conspiracy. That's ridiculous. Is it? Fraud, conspiracy, theft by deception. I bet the DA would be very interested in Chase's business model, especially if some of his other victims wanted to press charges. Chase stood up abruptly. I don't have to listen to this. Sit down, I said quietly. You can't tell me what to do. Sit down. There was something in my voice that made him hesitate. Rick had stopped wiping glasses and was watching our table carefully. A few other patrons had noticed the tension. You think you're tough? Chase said, but he sat back down. You think you can intimidate me? I think you're a coward who preys on vulnerable women and runs when someone fights back. I think you've been playing this game so long you forgot that some husbands don't just roll over and die. I could take you apart, he said, but there was no conviction in his voice. Could you? Because I'm thinking you're all show and no substance, like everything else in your life. He started to stand again, and I smiled. Go ahead. Take a swing. Give me a reason to defend myself. I'm sure Rick's security cameras would show exactly who threw the first punch. Chase looked around the bar, suddenly aware that we had an audience. Everyone was watching now, waiting to see what would happen next. This is insane, Kylie said. We're supposed to be adults here. Adults don't sleep with other people's spouses, I said. Adults don't lie and steal and manipulate people who trust them. What do you want from us? Sabrina asked, and for the first time since this whole thing started, she sounded genuinely defeated. I want you to understand that actions have consequences. I want Chase to find a new line of work, preferably in another state, and I want everyone in this town to know exactly what kind of people you are. And if we don't agree? Then tomorrow morning, I start making phone calls. To the police, to the other wives Chase has victimized, to your boss, to everyone who needs to know the truth about what you've been doing. Brianna was writing furiously now. This is extortion. No, this is justice. There's a difference. We sat in silence for several minutes, the weight of everything that had been said settling over the table like a shroud. Finally, Chase spoke. What if I leave town? What if I just disappear? That would be a start. And you'll leave the other women alone? You won't contact them? I won't have to. Once word gets out about you and Sabrina, they'll figure it out on their own. He nodded slowly, defeat written across his face. Fine. I'll go. Chase, Sabrina said, reaching for his hand. You don't have to? Yes, I do. He pulled his hand away. This is over, Sabrina. All of it. He left without looking back, and I watched him go with a sense of satisfaction I hadn't felt in weeks. Are you happy now? Sabrina asked. Getting there, but we're not done yet. 3 weeks later, the entire social structure of Millbrook was about to collapse, and it was all going to happen at Patricia Vance's annual Halloween party. Patricia was old money, the kind of woman who could make or break reputations with a single conversation at the country club. Her parties were legendary, elaborate affairs where everyone who mattered in town came to see and be seen. This year's party was going to be especially memorable. I'd spent the week since the confrontation at Flanagan's carefully laying groundwork. Chase had left town, just as he'd promised, but not before I'd had several interesting conversations with his former clients. It turned out that Jennifer Morrison and Patricia Vance were very interested to learn about his pattern of behavior. So were the other 3 women I'd identified. Sabrina had moved out of our house and into a small apartment across town. She'd also been quietly fired from her job, though officially she'd resigned to pursue other opportunities. Brianna was still representing her, but their friendship had cooled considerably after Sabrina's betrayal became public knowledge. The invitation to Patricia's party had been unexpected. We'd never moved in the same social circles, but apparently my recent notoriety had made me interesting enough to include on the guest list. You should come, Rick had said when I'd mentioned it to him. Might be good for you to get out, show your face around town. I'm thinking about it. Sabrina going to be there? Probably. Patricia invited half the town. You sure you're ready for that? More than ready. The party was everything I'd expected. Elaborate decorations, expensive catering, and a guest list that read like a who's who of Millbrook society. I arrived fashionably late, wearing a simple black suit that made me look like I belonged among the lawyers and doctors and business owners who filled Patricia's mansion. Sabrina was there, wearing a stunning red dress that probably cost more than most people's rent. She was talking to a group of women I didn't recognize, playing the role of the wronged wife who was bravely moving on with her life. Brianna was working the room like the political animal she was, probably trying to rebuild her reputation after the cocaine rumors had started circulating. Kylie was nowhere to be seen, which wasn't surprising. She'd been avoiding public events since our confrontation at Flanagan's. I spent the first hour mingling, accepting condolences about my marriage and deflecting questions about what had really happened. Most people were too polite to ask directly, but I could see the curiosity in their eyes. Around 10 o'clock, I made my move. Patricia had installed a new sound system for the party, complete with wireless speakers throughout the house and a central control panel in her study. It was exactly the kind of high-end setup that looked impressive but had terrible security. It took me less than 5 minutes to hack into the system from my phone. I waited until the party was in full swing, when everyone was relaxed and slightly drunk and paying attention to the costume contest Patricia was judging in the main ballroom. Then I activated my little surprise. The music stopped abruptly, replaced by the sound of Sabrina's voice, crystal clear through the expensive speakers. God, Eli is so boring in bed. I have to fake it every time just to get it over with. The ballroom went dead silent. Everyone turned to look at Sabrina, who had gone completely white. Chase's voice came through the speakers next. What about the money? You think he suspects anything? Are you kidding? He's too trusting for his own good. I could probably clean out his accounts, and he'd apologize for not having more to steal. The recording continued, playing highlights from months of conversations between Sabrina and Chase, their plans to take my money, their mockery of my appearance and personality, their detailed discussions of how to manipulate me into giving them what they wanted. But the real showstopper came next. A conversation between Sabrina and Brianna about how to frame me for domestic abuse if I ever discovered the affair. All you have to do is bruise yourself up a little, Brianna's voice said through the speakers. Maybe throw yourself down some stairs. Make it look like he snapped when he found out about Chase. Won't people ask questions? Not if we sell it right. Mild-mannered IT guy discovers wife's affair, goes into violent rage. It's a classic story. The police will eat it up. The recording ended, and the ballroom remained silent for several long seconds. Then the whispers started, growing louder as people processed what they'd just heard. Sabrina was standing frozen in the middle of the room, tears streaming down her face. Brianna had disappeared, probably looking for an exit. I walked through the crowd, which parted in front of me like I was radioactive. When I reached Sabrina, she looked up at me with a mixture of hatred and desperation. How could you do this to me? She whispered. The same way you did it to me, I said loud enough for everyone to hear. Except I'm better at it. Patricia Vance appeared at my elbow, her face flushed with anger. I think you should leave, Mr. Granger. Of course. Thank you for hosting such an enlightening evening. I walked toward the exit, stopping only when I reached the main hallway where most of the guests could still see me. Ladies and gentlemen, I called out, my voice carrying easily in the sudden quiet. I want to thank you all for your support during this difficult time. It's good to know who your real friends are. I paused, looking directly at Sabrina one last time. And it's even better to know who they aren't. I left Patricia's mansion and drove straight to Flanagan's, where Rick was waiting with a bottle of my favorite bourbon and a knowing smile. How'd it go? He asked, pouring me a double. Better than expected. Sabrina's social life just ended, Brianna's legal career is probably over, and half the town now knows exactly what kind of people they really are. And you feel good about that? I took a sip of bourbon and considered the question. Did I feel good about destroying my wife's reputation and humiliating her in front of everyone she'd ever wanted to impress? Did I feel good about exposing her lawyer's willingness to help frame an innocent man for domestic violence? Did I feel good about making sure neither of them would ever be trusted in this town again? Yes, I said finally. I feel very good about it. Rick nodded and raised his own glass. To justice served cold. To consequences, I corrected. Long overdue. We drank in comfortable silence while the Halloween party continued without us, and I reflected on how much my life had changed in just a few weeks. I'd lost a wife, but I'd gained something more valuable, the knowledge that I was still the man I'd always been underneath the suburban facade. Some people learn to forgive and forget. Others learn that revenge, properly planned and perfectly executed, can be more satisfying than any marriage ever was. I was definitely in the second category. Outside Flanagan's, Millbrook went about its business, but nothing would ever be quite the same. Sabrina would leave town eventually, probably following Chase to whatever rock he'd crawled under. Brianna would find new clients, but her reputation would always carry the stain of what she'd been willing to do for a friend and me. I'd go back to my quiet life, my small business, my comfortable house. But now everyone would know that the mild-mannered IT guy had teeth, and he wasn't afraid to use them. Some lessons are worth teaching, even if they destroy everything in the process, especially then.